my experience with spiritual parenting or spiritual father and mother began, I would say, over 30 years ago. And it began when we were in college, and it began actually with our pastor. At that time, he was simply Pastor Oscar and Pastor Beatrice Moreu. Now he's a bishop. They invited us into their home. You know, I just think of the way that Jesus invited his disciples into his home. It wasn't just teaching. It wasn't just preaching on a Sunday. But, you know, our pastor did invite us into his home. And we just got to observe him.
If anybody were to ask me, who's your spiritual father? Immediately, I would say our Bishop Oscar Moreu. But it's not a term we use in our church.
It was not a terminology that we basically use in our church. I come from the African Christian Church and Schools. And we used to hear that name from the outside, the Pentecostal charismatic places.
My experience with the term spiritual father and spiritual mother was initially foreign because I didn't grow up in a church context that used those terms at all. And so I do have spiritual parents who I love and who I revere, who have called out things in me, things that were docile, things that were latent within me. It's because of being called out that I'm an author of a book. It's because of being called out, being seen in that way, that I've achieved different things in ministry. I have many spiritual children who then say, okay, we call you spiritual mother. And I teach them, I pray for them, I contend for them.
My name is Kyama Mugambi, and I research Christianity in Africa. Spiritual kinship, or the idea of spiritual fathers and mothers, is something that I've seen grow among Pentecostal and charismatic churches in Kenya and in other parts of Africa that I've visited in the last 20 years. This feature is where congregation members coalesce around their leaders, their pastors, as spiritual parents, as a kind of extended family of brothers and sisters. In the different churches that I have visited, I see a commendable sense of community as people share their lives together as this kind of extended family within the church. But I've also seen situations where these relationships can become susceptible to manipulation, where the uncritical acceptance of a leader creates situations of abuse. And I share in the concern and even skepticism as to whether these relationships are actually beneficial for their churches. This has created a research interest in me. I've become curious. I want to see what the features of this spiritual kinship are. How these families have presented themselves in worship in places like Nairobi. These are some of the stories and the insights that I hope to bring in this documentary. Over the course of my research, I found many sermons, many talks, and even written material talking about different sides of spiritual parenthood. And most of these were by male pastors. You're going to hear from women pastors and from scholars who are themselves practitioners. And that is researchers who are also ministers and pastors.
It's a term that we know. This is a person who again called you into ministry. I remember many years ago, as a university student, I was bent on being a lawyer, and then comes this young pastor with a great vision, and he wanted to have at least 30 college students in ministry.
And so we patterned our lives the way that they were living. We simply just copied. We did come from pretty good families, pretty functional families, but there was something different that this couple was doing that we gained from. As an authority or even as a spiritual parent, you are parenting this person and helping them grow. You're kind of like filling the gaps that are there in their discipleship, in their journey of discipleship.
This idea actually really anchors a person or grounds a child growing up. And then it becomes a very big strength, because you will find people who are very well mentored, discipled with the idea of spiritual parents are people who are really grounded as adults, people who are really strong and mature in their faith.
From where I come from, it is more of mentorship sessions where you have a parent who takes you through, or they hold your hand as you are growing. I have had my grandmother. My grandmother has been basically a strong person I have endeavored to look, because her faith shaped who I really am today. Another person is my mother. Surprisingly, I would not have thought that she became my spiritual mother, but because of the way she used to wake up very early in the morning to pray for us, she became a spiritual mother.
When I use the term spiritual mother, for me, his wife is not now by default my spiritual mother. Again, because we didn't have that kind of, we've had that discipling relationship, but again, because for us it's a generic term, it doesn't mean because our lead pastor or bishop is spiritual father, then by default she becomes spiritual mother. If you ask me who's my spiritual mother, I would say it is Laura Mautza, who's a totally different person, who came into my life when I was a young intern. She hosted me in her house, really walked with me, continued to walk with me through life, was my best mate. Even right now, if I was in a crisis, and a very private crisis where I could be 150% vulnerable, I'll call Laura.
I came from not knowing or not hearing about them to then hearing them with a negative connotation. And so I really didn't want anything to do with them, or it didn't even occur to me. I just thought, oh, that's probably them. The model of church that I was sold to and that I saw growing up was a very corporate type of culture. So it means that I know you, I know your name, but I do not know anything else about you. Now, because of spiritual family, there are people who I call spiritual parents, and there are people who call me spiritual parents. The difference between that old church model, where that it feels very corporate, and this one of spiritual family, is that as a spiritual parent, I agonize over you.
We have Catholic fathers, and as a child, I was raised a Catholic. And this was the first encounter, and for me it was depicting a religious figure who was there to mentor us spiritually, and again connecting us with God. We used to revere him, which of course was not a bad concept, because the aspect of respect is so much into the family setup.
Stories abound of how one pastor or another have taken advantage of their congregation members. I've often heard of how people gave their hard-earned money to a spiritual father or spiritual mother, and how some succumbed to situations and demands that led to abuse. Given these troubling concerns and challenges, I asked the researchers to share with us some insights about what the benefits of this kind of relationship or this kind of kinship might be.
The church is there today because of family, not because of cooperation or because of government. Because of that, the spiritual family has immense strength. There's physical inheritance, but there's also that spiritual inheritance, which is a really, really powerful thing.
For me, I look at the terms as quite originally depicting, spiritual mentorship, which again, we could still locate that from, the biblical sense, talking about older women nurturing young women, Paul talking to Timothy about, you are my son and stuff like that.
We are humanizing, we are adding the relational aspects when it comes to these Christian disciplines that are very central in our growth in faith. If they are Christian, I would say, I seem to see that kind of language, like Paul speaks of Timothy that way, like, this is my son in the faith.
When people come to big cities, like rural urban migration, they do not have friends in the cities. So, and as Africans, we believe in communality. You have left your family, your friends in the village, and when you come to the city, you need friends. And where do you find them? You find them in church. You go to church, to a city the first Sunday, you find friends. You find, so to speak, you find people even who know the city, who can explain where is the bank, where can I find work. They find that within the church.
The way kinship still gives people that sense of identity and belonging in a society whereby aspects of communality are not so much upheld because of secularism and capitalism.
Given the strengths and the redemptive qualities of spiritual kinship, what then are the specific issues that we should be legitimately concerned about as we consider it?
I think for me, the main drawback of the way kinship was being propagated in these churches is the element of the possibility of abuse of power specifically. Because when you look at the way the kinship is propagated, there is the aspect of the bishops or the church leaders or the pastors having the authority, being the authority figure within the context of the church. They are in charge of the congregants, who are, in quotes, their spiritual children. And so the pastors and the bishops who have this authority, they gain this authority also from the perspective of God. It's a God-given authority. And so those who are beneath them or those who follow them do not have any room of questioning what the authority figure is actually saying.
The spiritual father or mother is kind of, let me not say holier than thou, but they exercise this sense of authority that cannot be questioned by the Christian. Then you may be saying this person is kind of beyond accountability, beyond mentorship, beyond discussion.
And therefore, those people who are older than us, besides respecting them, we can also show respect by giving them our material things in terms of it's like giving them gratitude, a response of like, you are my daddy, you are my mom, and therefore to show that I'm grateful, I give you money or I give you something else. And because of that, the other abuse that comes in material form, whereby the church members will tend to give and give and give and give, and then at the end the pastors become so wealthy at the expense of the church members.
And I was able to... There are these groups that emerges, many groups that emerges within the bigger kinship, and you find each circle has gatekeepers. You cannot just come in. So I found that to be challenging, the issue of gatekeeping and who is allowed in the circle and who is not allowed.
This kinship that individuals have been drawn into can be a closed club, whereby people feel that they belong to each other and they do not wish to move and they are not comfortable with those that are coming in.
Some people feel that they are left out because of either their economic status or not being seen to be spiritually mature enough.
The idea of spiritual parenthood or church as family among Pentecostal and charismatic churches is not simple or straightforward. It has many nuances and angles. Here are some insights that emerged as we thought about it.
Many times, even in our biological families, there's a lot of murkiness, and it always comes up during weddings. You can see the drunk uncle, you can see the promiscuous auntie. Our families are dramatic, right? And has there been abuse of spiritual family? There has been.
How the term is used, how people have to handle or relate with this man of God, when you really look at it, it completely defies how we are supposed to honor our earthly leaders, so that almost this person becomes a god in a sense.
Over-reliance in the sense that if I know that my mentor prays for me, in most cases, I'll be calling them every now and then. Please pray for me for this, where the spiritual parents now takes the roles of parenting and taking them away from the family, where they just rely on them because they are a family. We've even heard of history where, I've had it in my church, where a spiritual parent told a spiritual son, you don't even have to go home. I am spiritual son. I am your spiritual father. So you can always rely on me on anything.
I'd like to quote the late Miles Monroe. And one of the things he used to say is that if you do not understand something, you're likely to abuse it. If you don't understand that you're the authority, even in your home, and that God has entrusted you and kind of has certain expectations of the way that you're going to raise up your children. If you don't understand it, then you're going to abdicate that role.
I have found there are people who never take that concept of God parent seriously. So that becomes a great weakness, because it means then that these God parents play no role. Imagine, I have observed that there are people who idolize. One can never make decisions of life without the person, quote unquote, they consider to be their godparent. And I think I've observed that more for the person who goes needing, having a need. You know, the second part I was talking about, where somebody is an adult, a young person, and they're going to their pastor and they're needing support because they have a need or a spiritual, either a life need or a spiritual need.
They have such a redemptive power to them. If you feel like, hey, my physical family is messed up, there's a redemptive power.
And I think the church is the family. What I think about the church, it's that place where we have that opportunity to heal, first of all, for salvation, for deliverance, for healing. I'm also a therapist, and people might think, isn't that the role of therapists? But I feel that the church is wholesome. It is a community.
There was a young man who wanted to marry, and he was escorted by the bishop, the elders, and some of the men to go and negotiate for bridal, which is a milestone within the African system. Another lady spoke of having gotten the job she was doing by referral through one of the members of her group, which is one of the women groups, and therefore we find it that way that people get that kind of support that is usually really gotten from close people to you, your relatives, and your close-knit family.
It was able to bring people together, give them a sense of identity, and also make sure that the people who are in these churches come together within that context of understanding who each other is, although they come from different backgrounds. They banded together in order to be able to work together, worship together, but also to help each other.
I think it brings in our African understanding, you know, this idea that we are related, we are connected. There's this sense of community also.
The provision of support in the urban centers. This is mental support, social support, economic support. You find that the members within that church stand together as a family.
These women only group. I found in my research that we can no longer argue that women are not contributing. We can no longer argue that women are not preaching. We can no longer argue that women are in the backspace. From this research, I found women in the forefront, like contributing, but contributing in ways that I found to be very, very interesting, like prayer groups for women, prayer occasions for women.
It was during that 1 year of discipling us, training us as leaders, exposing us to ministry, that then we were able to come to a place, even with a lot of prayer, where I knew, not that it's him who called me, but it was very clear God used him to call me and to walk with me into ministry.
You have chosen the eldest son. Because let me tell you, Elijah and Elisha had a spiritual family connection. Elisha was Elijah's son. We know that Elijah did not have any biological children, yet he refers to Elisha as his son. Yet he leaves a spiritual inheritance that is powerful, that's potent, and even the one that he carried himself. My spiritual father said, you know, I see in you this, and I see in you that. And as a result, then I am here today ministering and doing everything that I'm doing. That I feel like is a huge, huge strength of spiritual family. I had a quote the other day. Somebody said that your biological family is the conduit through which God chooses for you to get into this earth. But your spiritual family is the catapulting force to get you into your destiny, into your God-given purpose.
You know, they say that when a man is seated, or an old man is seated somewhere, they see far. And for people who have walked a journey before us, they have a lot of things that they have seen. That is a strength. We have those spiritual parents who help you to identify that you are going through a challenge in your career, and they even create workshops for you. They shape who you are, they shape who you become, because it's like you are having someone who is playing a role of like a parent. Like they are very close to you, they listen to you, they help you think, they help you reason.
I'd mentioned earlier that there's a difference between... Even when we look at Isaiah 61, I mean, it is what the church is about. Restoration, restoring us back to God. reconciling us in our relationships. We come in as broken people, but God, and He loves us as we are. He brings us into church, but it's for us to grow and to become more godly, more Christ-like. I see the salvation of someone who comes from that background, where I was not parented. My parents didn't know anything. They didn't know what they were doing. But in church, where there's the wisdom of God, there's the Bible, that teaches us these things. It's like you're a redemption. It is like being saved.
Somebody who you walk with and do life with. Somebody who is mature and above you in matters spiritual, but also in matters of life, because then they become the person who can ground you and walk a journey with you to help you mature.
And how it was intended to be is not this gigantic spiritual father or mother who everybody calls. It's almost like, to be able to continue this thing we call the gospel, which is very redemptive, is saying that the link that Jesus Christ left, I'm going to continue that link from generation to generation. It doesn't
It's very easy to have a suspicious view towards it, and rightly so, because I think in this kind of situation, a very important aspect that we must never let go of is discernment. And when it's the extreme, you actually need to be in that space 10 minutes and you'll see it. You will see all the wrong things happening.
Understanding of African culture is still very much prevalent today. And so our theology must be able to speak into these kinds of understandings as well.
But then I would also say, there is a way in which we can also contribute to our understanding of faith when we think of some of our cultural locations or perspectives. This idea of kinship, that we are all connected. When we add this language of father and mother, it could also be a way of Africans contributing to the understanding of the faith, which again I think is important. There is a place for that language, provided of course we are understanding it in the way it's being used and not kind of going towards some of those negative aspects that we've previously talked about.
Then you go for an interview, then you wait for the results, and then you are required to get. This research points out to the need of theological and spiritual formation that takes religious kingship seriously and the context in which church happens, so that the church is packaged with regard to where that church is happening.
It is good, first of all, to appreciate that people have different languages in the big Christian family. Though we have these common aspects that unite us as Christians.
My grandparents adopted children, not
Positive spiritual relationship, father, mother to child, whatever, must have the ingredients of love. There must be nurturing, there must be accountability, there must be growth, and it should be Christ-centered at all times.
I am a product of spiritual parenting, and my responsibility is to pass that on to the next generation, and I am doing that very, very fervently. It's every single person sees themselves as a spiritual mother or father, and everybody sees themselves as a spiritual child. And that way, we can perpetuate this redemptive, saving power that is Christianity.
I think that's a good thing with research, because we get to go beyond, or beneath, let me say, beneath the surface and beneath some of those things that we take for granted or easily critique or easily accept. But when you think about it, then I think it can provide, maybe different language to speak of.
So in this life, we must be discipled, mentored, and we must then become mature enough to get to that space of being a discipler or a mentor. For somebody who already knows that concept, be vigilant. Vigilant in the sense of, if you do have a spiritual father, what's their role in your life? If you have a spiritual mother, what's their role in your life?
Then test the spirituality that they are mentoring you into. You ought not to be coerced into manipulative trends. We are not replacing our biological parents, because that is an aspect that would come into the minds of people who are not familiar with the terms mom and dad in the church. And it's not a replacement, but an extension of the communal behaviors that we have been socialized into within society and coming out from our family ties, our family relations, and our social behaviors.
That you become a mentor. You yourself become a discipler stroke mentor, so that you give. Somebody gave, and the reason they gave is so that you too mature enough so that you can also give.
But spiritual parenting is being vulnerable and being open about your own life, and with the idea that you want this person to have a better life. And so for me, if I was just to put it in a nutshell, spiritual parenting is that mentoring or coaching someone and so that they become better. The good thing about a spiritual family is that you can move. If you feel, there's excesses, there's abuse, you can go to another family.
You understanding and knowing that you can still rely on the scripture as well as you relying on your mentor, that can be something good, or your spiritual parent.
What church is and what was modeled to us by Jesus Christ is walking with other people.
The idea of spiritual parents or church as family has been a part of the church right from the beginning. We find it in the New Testament, we find it in the first few hundred years of the church, and right through history up to today. There are legitimate concerns for us to be concerned, maybe even skeptical about these relationships and their impact on congregations. But on the other side, we have seen genuine stories of life change, of redemption, and transformation that have emerged from them. The notion of spiritual parenthood is very much a part of the story of the church in Nairobi and in other parts of Africa, and it seems to be strengthening its roots in Pentecostal and charismatic churches. What it will look like in the next 50 or 100 years remains to be seen. What we do know is that there's much to reflect on for those who are part of churches that have these kinds of relationships. Our hope is that the stories and the insights shared here will inspire conversations that will shed more light on what spiritual kinship means for the church today and in the future. Conversations that will build on the redemptive dimensions of these relationships, and where there are risks and concerns, conversations that will encourage accountability and foster congregational care as we look to the future of the church in Africa.